Hi there. Welcome back to Haunting Vales. Tonight, we open not a book of stories, but of secrets. A diary, forgotten for years, its pages yellowed with time. Yet within them lies a truth too dangerous to remain buried. To the world, it is just a relic of the past. But to Poirot, every line, every missing word, is a whisper from the shadows. Who owned this diary? Why was it hidden? And what crime still bleeds through its fading ink? As the puzzle unfolds, the forgotten becomes unforgettable, and the past refuses to stay silent. This is the puzzle of the Forgotten Diary, a Hercule Poirot mystery. And before we turn the first page together, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because more chilling mysteries await, only here on Haunting Vales. Chapter 1. The Arrival of the Forgotten Diary. The morning air over London carried a damp chill, as if the mist itself held secrets. Along the narrow cobblestone street of Bloomsbury, a carriage rattled past, its wheels hissing in the drizzle. The street, with its bookshops and forgotten corners, seemed the sort of place where one might discover a clue overlooked by everyone else. Inside a modest townhouse, Hercule Poirot sat comfortably in an armchair by the fireplace, his polished shoes gleaming, his mustache perfectly groomed. He was not engaged in work that morning. Rather, he was indulging in a rare hour of leisure. A copy of the Times lay folded upon his lap, though he was not truly reading. His sharp eyes wandered to the mantelpiece where an unopened envelope rested. Captain Arthur Hastings, faithful companion, leaned against the window frame, gazing out at the drizzle. His patience was never long when Poirot entered his reflective moods. "My dear Poirot," Hastings said at last, turning from the glass, "you've stared at that envelope for nearly 10 minutes. Why not simply open it?" Poirot smiled faintly, his fingers tapping the arm of his chair. "Because, mon ami, is not yet time. You see, one must sometimes let a thing wait. It ripens, just as a diary, locked away for years, may become far more telling when opened in the correct hour." Hastings raised a brow. "A diary? What diary?" With perfect calm, Poirot lifted the envelope and slid it open with the precision of a surgeon. He read silently, and his brow furrowed ever so slightly. Then he read the letter aloud, his voice carrying a note of curiosity. "Monsieur Poirot, I beg for your assistance. A diary has been found in the library of my late uncle, Sir Reginald Whitcombe. The diary appears ordinary, yet within its faded pages lies mention of an event most sinister, one that casts suspicion upon our family's past. I implore you to examine it before it falls into the wrong hands. Yours sincerely, Evelyn Whitcombe." "A diary," Hastings repeated, "found in a library of all places. Do you suppose it's of any real consequence?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Mon ami, never underestimate the power of what is written and forgotten. A diary is the echo of a soul, and when it resurfaces years later, it can disturb even the most peaceful family." He folded the letter neatly. "We are invited to Whitcombe Manor in Surrey. I think we should go." Hastings brightened, always eager for an adventure. "At last, something to stir us out of this drizzle. But, Poirot, surely a diary cannot hold the same weight as, say, a murder weapon." "Ah, Hastings," Poirot said softly. "In the novels of our dear Madame Christie, has she not shown again and again that words may kill as surely as a dagger? Remember the Murder of Roger Ackroyd? A single written word in that tale shattered every assumption. And in the clocks, the placement of one object told the truth when all else misled. Yes, Hastings, sometimes the smallest of writings conceals the greatest of crimes." He rose, straightened his immaculate tie, and declared with certainty, "We go at once." Whitcombe Manor rose from the Surrey countryside like a monument of faded grandeur. Its high stone walls were weathered, the ivy clinging like memories that refused to let go. The long drive was lined with ancient oaks, their branches interlaced like fingers guarding a secret. Inside the manor, they were received by Evelyn Whitcombe herself. She was a woman in her 30s, composed yet visibly uneasy. Her eyes carried the weight of sleepless nights. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings," she greeted, her voice tinged with relief. "You cannot know what it means to me that you've come." Poirot inclined his head. "Mademoiselle, your letter intrigued me greatly. You spoke of a diary. Might we see it at once?" She hesitated, glancing toward the great double doors of the library. "Yes, but I must warn you, this diary is disturbing. My uncle passed away 3 months ago, and while we sorted his papers, we found this book hidden at the back of a locked drawer. It is old, the leather cracked, the ink faded. But the words within, they hint at something dreadful that happened here decades ago." She led them into the library, a cavernous room lined with shelves that seemed to stretch endlessly upward. Dust motes swirled in the filtered light. Upon a great oak table lay the diary, its cover worn, the clasp broken. Poirot approached with reverence, as though standing before evidence of crime. He opened the diary slowly, his gloved hands careful not to tear the fragile pages. The handwriting was uneven, hurried, as though the writer had feared discovery. He read aloud a passage. "October 12th. The night is heavy with silence. I cannot bear the weight of what I know. She suspects, though she dares not say it aloud. If the truth emerges, the house itself will never recover." Poirot paused. Suggestive, is it not? But incomplete. The writer does not name himself or the person he fears. Evelyn clasped her hands tightly. There is more. Further in the diary, there is mention of a death that was never explained. A woman, an outsider, no relation to the Whitcombes, who stayed here briefly. Her name was Margaret Lane. And then, suddenly, she was gone. Hastings frowned. "Margaret Lane? I don't recall hearing of her." "That is because," Evelyn said quietly, her name was scarcely spoken again. "The official story was that she left. But the diary suggests otherwise." Poirot leaned closer to the pages. "A disappearance buried by silence. How very curious. Madame Christie herself has written of such vanishing women, has she not? An absent in the spring, though not a Poirot tale. The truth emerges only when memory cannot be silenced. And here, perhaps, we face a memory that the Whitcombes sought to bury." He turned the pages, and suddenly another line caught his eye. "I hear footsteps at night. They whisper through the halls. I fear what lies beneath the east wing. The key must never be found." Poirot's brows knitted together. The east wing. Always in these houses, there is a wing, a room, a chamber where silence is heavier than the rest. Evelyn nodded gravely. "The east wing was sealed after the fire 30 years ago. It has not been opened since." Yet, Poirot murmured, "Your uncle kept this diary, hidden but not destroyed. That is not the act of a man who wished to erase the past. It is the act of a man who wished for the truth to one day be uncovered." A clock struck the hour. Its echo filled the library, deep and solemn. Hastings shifted uneasily. "Poirot, I don't like it. This house, it feels as though it's hiding something. The diary, the east wing, a vanished woman. It's as though we've stepped straight into one of Christie's own stories." Poirot closed the diary gently. "Yes, Hastings. And as always, when the stage is set, the play must unfold. We shall examine the east wing tomorrow. Tonight we observe, we listen. A house such as this, with its silences and shadows, will speak to those who attend." That night, the corridors of Whitcombe Manor seemed alive with echoes. Hastings could not sleep. He swore he heard faint footsteps in the hallway. Evelyn, pale from worry, avoided the subject, and Poirot, sitting upright in his chamber, watched the flickering candlelight dance upon the diary's cover. He whispered softly to himself, as though addressing an unseen adversary. The puzzle begins not with what is written, but with what is omitted. In this diary, it omits too much. The forgotten diary had been opened, and with it, the past stirred once more. Chapter 2: Secrets in the East Wing. The following morning dawned gray, the sky a flat expanse of pewter. The rain of the night had left the lawns of Whitcombe Manor damp and glistening, while the great oaks seemed to brood in silence. Hastings, walking down to breakfast, could not help but feel the atmosphere of the place weigh upon him. The house had grandeur, yes, but it was the grandeur of a stage where some unseen tragedy had once played and left its shadow behind. Poirot entered the dining room immaculate as always, his suit pressed, his mustache in fine order, as though the heavy air of the manor could not touch him. Evelyn Whitcombe joined them soon after, her face pale, but her manner determined. She seemed to have steeled herself for the day's revelations. "It is the East Wing you wish to see, Mr. Poirot," she said as tea was poured. "I must tell you, it was sealed for good reason. My uncle always warned us never to enter there. He said the wing carried only sorrow." Poirot lifted his cup delicately. "And yet, mademoiselle, it is sorrow that often conceals truth. The diary compels us to look within those walls. Tell me, has no one entered in 30 years? "Not to my knowledge," Evelyn said. "The fire gutted much of that part of the house. Afterward, the doors were locked, and a new wing was built for use. The East Wing became a place of silence." Hastings frowned. "It's remarkable to think an entire part of a house could remain closed for 3 decades. Doesn't anyone ever wonder?" Evelyn's lips tightened. "Wonder, yes. But to question the Whitcombe family past was not encouraged." Poirot's eyes glinted. In 5 Little Pigs, Madame Christie gave us a tale where memory itself was the barrier. Here we have not memory, but stone and timber barring the way. Yet memory, Hastings and stone alike, they both preserve what others would prefer forgotten. After breakfast, Evelyn led them to the corridor that ended in a great oak door bound with iron. Its surface was blackened, scorched by flame long ago. The keyhole was stuffed with hardened wax, as though sealing it against the curious. Poirot examined the door with great care. He brushed a gloved hand over the wood, noting every detail. "Hastings, do you observe? The scorch marks are deep near the hinges. Fire licked here first, but the door held, and so it was sealed afterward, not broken. Curious." Evelyn produced a small iron key from a chain around her neck. "My uncle gave me this years ago, though he told me never to use it. I have kept it ever since." She hesitated before handing it to Poirot, as if passing him a burden she had long carried. Poirot accepted it gravely, and with one smooth turn, the lock gave way. The wax cracked, the key turned, and the door creaked open on rusted hinges. The air that rushed out was heavy, stale, tinged with soot. Inside lay a corridor of shadow. The wallpaper had peeled, the ceiling sagged in places, and the faint smell of smoke lingered as though the fire had never truly gone out. Hastings stepped in first, though reluctantly. "Good Lord, Poirot, it's like stepping back into the past itself." The rooms beyond were ruined, yet strangely preserved, beds half-burned, paintings blistered by heat, dust thick upon every surface. They moved slowly, Evelyn holding a lamp, Poirot studying every detail with the gaze of a man who missed nothing. In what had once been a sitting room, Poirot halted. The wallpaper here was less damaged, though faded, patterned with ivy leaves. Above the fireplace hung the remains of a portrait, the canvas blackened, the face unrecognizable. Poirot studied the mantel. His finger traced the dust, then paused upon a faint mark. "Observe, Hastings. Something once rested here. A box, perhaps, or a book." It was removed, but not recently. The dust has settled in layers since. Still, the impression remains. Evelyn spoke softly. There were rumors that my uncle kept certain things hidden here before the fire. Family papers, heirlooms. Some said Margaret Lane's belongings were among them. Hastings turned sharply. Then you believe she truly died here? Evelyn looked away. I do not know what to believe. They pressed on. At the far end of the corridor, another door stood. This one was smaller, unburnt, its wood intact. Poirot bent low, his eyes sharp. Hastings, do you see? The lock here was forced at some time. Long ago, yes, but forced. Someone entered or tried to conceal their entry. With effort, they pushed it open. Beyond lay a small chamber, untouched by fire. The air was thick with dust, and in the center of the room stood a trunk, iron-bound, its lid closed. Evelyn gasped. That trunk belonged to my uncle. Poirot approached slowly. He knelt, studied the lock, then looked up at Hastings. It has been opened before, but not often. Shall we? The lid creaked as they raised it. Inside lay a jumble of objects, singed letters, a woman's scarf faded to gray, and, most striking of all, a small photograph in a cracked silver frame. The picture was of a young woman, smiling faintly, her hair swept back in the style of 30 years ago. Evelyn's breath caught. Margaret Lane. It must be her. Poirot lifted the photograph delicately. So, the lady of mystery emerges. Hastings, observe her eyes. There is intelligence, perhaps determination. Not a woman easily erased. And yet, she was erased. He set the photograph aside and sifted through the letters. Most were damaged, the ink blurred, but fragments could be read. She knows the truth, must never reach the light. If discovered, the East Wing will betray us all. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Mon Dieu, the diary spoke of whispers in the East Wing, and here the trunk answers with its own whispers. Do you not feel it, Hastings? We are on the threshold of something most grave. Evelyn clasped her hands tightly. But why keep these things? Why not destroy them? If my uncle wished the past hidden. Poirot's expression softened. Because, mademoiselle, the human heart is rarely simple. Perhaps Sir Reginald wished to forget, and yet also to preserve. To destroy would be to admit guilt. To keep would be to hope for vindication. The trunk is the act of a man divided. They closed the trunk carefully and left the chamber. The silence of the East Wing seemed heavier as they withdrew, as though the house itself resented their intrusion. That evening, as rain lashed once more at the windows, they gathered in the library. The diary lay open on the table, the photograph beside it. Poirot sat very still, his fingertips pressed together, his mind deep in thought. Hastings paced the carpet, restless. Well, Poirot, what do you make of it? A diary hinting at guilt, a photograph of a vanished woman, a trunk of secrets hidden away for decades. It all adds up to something. But what? Poirot's eyes flickered. It adds up, Hastings to silence carefully maintained. Someone wished Margaret Lane forgotten. Someone wished her name struck from memory. And yet, the diary, the trunk, they survived. That is no accident. Evelyn leaned forward. Do you think Margaret was murdered here? Poirot paused, then shook his head slightly. At this moment, I do not think, mademoiselle. I only observe. But murder, yes, it lingers as a possibility. Yet one must not leap. In Sad Cypress, Madame Christie showed us how appearances deceive, how innocence may be shrouded in guilt and guilt in innocence. We must proceed with care. A log cracked in the fireplace, the sudden noise making Hastings start. Poirot, however, did not move. His gaze was fixed on the diary, as though its faded ink spoke directly to him. At midnight tonight, Peril murmured at last, I shall return to the East Wing alone. There is something yet that I must hear. A house, Hastings, is like a witness. By day it conceals, but by night it whispers. The hour struck 12. Hastings, half protesting, remained behind, while Poirot, candle in hand, walked the silent corridors. His steps echoed softly on the wooden floor. The air grew colder as he neared the east wing. Inside, the shadows stretched long, the ruined rooms lying in mute testimony. Poirot's candlelight flickered against the scorched walls. He paused often listening, and in the silence, he thought he heard it, a faint sound, like a sigh, like footsteps long faded yet unwilling to rest. He entered the chamber of the trunk once more. The objects lay as they had before, but now, in the wavering light, Poirot saw something he had missed. A faint mark scratched into the wooden floorboards near the trunk. He bent low. The mark was deliberate, a set of initials. Monsieur L. Margaret Lane. Poirot's eyes gleamed. So, mademoiselle, you were here, and you wished not to be forgotten. Very well. Hercule Poirot has heard you. He straightened, extinguished his candle, and left the east wing with the quiet certainty of a man who now held a piece of the puzzle. The forgotten diary had opened the door. The east wing had spoken its secret. But the truth, the truth was still waiting. Chapter 3, Whispers of the Past. The morning broke with a fragile stillness, as though the house itself was weary after the night's unease. Hastings, bleary-eyed, came down to breakfast with a scowl. Poirot, he muttered, I don't know how you do it. I scarcely slept a wink. Those corridors, those drafts, the feeling of being watched. I swear this place is cursed. Poirot, perfectly composed over his eggs, looked up with a smile. It is not cursed, Hastings. It is guilty, and guilt leaves its impression upon walls, upon people, upon silence itself. Evelyn entered then, pale but determined. She glanced at the photograph of Margaret Lane, which Poirot had set upon the sideboard as though it were a silent guest at their table. Her voice was hushed. She looked so alive, she whispered. It is dreadful to think she might have died here. Poirot inclined his head. Mademoiselle, you must prepare yourself. An ordeal by innocence. Madame Christie taught us that families can carry secrets for decades. Here, too, I suspect the Whitcombes have lived side by side with silence and shadow. But silence, once broken, does not return. Later that day, they called upon Mrs. Dorothy Clark, an elderly housekeeper who had served the Whitcombe family since her youth. She was brought in from the small cottage she now inhabited at the edge of the estate. Her hands trembled as she poured her tea, but her eyes still held a keen glint. I knew Mississippi Lane, she said softly. Oh, yes, I remember her well. A kind young lady. Came here as a companion to Lady Whitcombe, Sir Reginald's sister. But she wasn't like the others. She had spirit. She asked questions. Poirot leaned forward. What sort of questions, madam? The old woman's gaze shifted to the window. About the family. About the fire that destroyed the east wing. About what was kept locked away. She was curious, too curious. Hastings frowned, and then she disappeared. Mrs. Clark's hands tightened on her teacup. One morning, she was gone. They told us she'd left in the night, but I never believed it. A girl like her would not vanish without a word. Something happened, something the family buried. Poirot studied her face intently. And you, madam, why did you never speak? Her eyes filled with tears. Because the Whitcombes were powerful, and because, deep down, I was afraid. That house, it held shadows, even in daylight. Poirot placed a hand gently over hers. And yet you have spoken now. That is most brave. Merci. Back at the manor, Poirot gathered Hastings and Evelyn in the library. The diary lay open once more. Consider what we have, Poirot began, his voice calm but firm. A diary filled with fear and silence. A trunk with letters that speak of concealment. A photograph of a woman erased from history. And now, testimony that she asked questions that others dared not. What does it suggest? Hastings frowned. That Margaret discovered something. Something worth silencing. Poirot nodded. Precisely. She stumbled upon a truth. And truth, Hastings, is the most dangerous thing of all when families are built upon lies. Evelyn's hands trembled. But what truth? What could be so terrible? Poirot's eyes glinted. That, mademoiselle, is what we must uncover. That evening, the manor's current occupants gathered for dinner. Evelyn had invited her cousins, the Whitcombe heirs who had inherited the estate after Sir Reginald's passing. There was Charles Whitcombe, a stern man with sharp features, his voice curt and dismissive. His wife, Clara, was all nervous smiles and darting glances. Then there was Michael, younger, restless, with a habit of drumming his fingers as though silence were unbearable to him. Poirot observed them keenly throughout the meal. He noted the way Evelyn avoided Charles's gaze, the way Clara flinched when Margaret Lane's name was mentioned, and the way Michael grew restless whenever the East Wing was discussed. At last, Poirot spoke with deliberate calm. Mesdames, messieurs, you will forgive me if I speak directly. I am investigating the matter of Margaret Lane. The reaction was immediate. Charles's face darkened, Clara dropped her fork with a clatter, and Michael muttered something under his breath. Evelyn looked stricken but resolute. Charles's voice was sharp. This is nonsense. Margaret Lane left of her own accord. To suggest otherwise is to slander our family. Poirot's mustache twitched faintly. And yet, monsieur, the diary says otherwise. The diary of your uncle. Shall we call that slander too? The silence that followed was thick. Clara's hands shook as she reached for her glass. Michael rose suddenly from his chair. I won't sit here listening to this, he snapped, before striding from the room. Poirot watched him go with a calm, unreadable expression. Curious, he murmured. When truth is spoken, some flee, some tremble, some deny, but always it reveals. Later, Poirot and Hastings walked alone in the garden, the night air heavy with the scent of damp earth. Hastings spoke in a low, urgent voice. Poirot, what do you make of it? The way Charles blustered, the way Clara trembled, Michael storming out. It's as if they're all hiding something. Poirot's eyes gleamed in the moonlight. Indeed, Hastings. Each shadow is cast by a different light. But I begin to see the outline. Margaret Lane's disappearance. Yes, it lies at the center. But around it, there is something greater, something that binds the family in silence. In the secret of chimneys, there were clues hidden in plain sight, tied to history and inheritance. Here, too, I think the diary and the trunk are not merely about a vanished woman. They are about what she uncovered. Hastings shivered. And what if what she uncovered was murder? Poirot's gaze was steady. Then, mon ami, murder will not remain hidden. It never does. That night, Evelyn came to Poirot, her face pale, her voice trembling. Mr. Poirot, she whispered, there is something I must confess. Last night, after you returned from the East Wing, I went there myself. I had to see, and in the chamber with the trunk, I found something. She drew from her pocket a folded scrap of paper, brown with age. Poirot unfolded it carefully. Upon it were only a few words, hurriedly written. The fire was no accident. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Now the picture grows clearer. Margaret Lane discovered the truth of the fire. And for that, she paid dearly. Evelyn's voice shook. But if the fire was deliberate, what does that mean for my family? Poirot's expression was grave. It means, mademoiselle, that the Whitcombes are not merely guardians of silence. They are guardians of guilt. The next morning, Poirot convened them all once more in the library. The diary, the photograph, the letters, the scrap of paper, all were laid out upon the great oak table. Mess Amos, Poirot began, his voice calm but resonant. We have before us fragments of the past. A fire that was no accident. A woman who asked questions and vanished. A family that has lived in silence ever since. The time has come to confront what truly happened in this house. Charles's face was red with anger. "You have no right," he barked. Poirot raised a hand. "On the contrary, monsieur, it is the truth that has the right, and it will be heard." His gaze swept the room. "Tomorrow, I shall reveal what happened to Margaret Lane, and who among you has carried the weight of her silence. Tonight, you may tremble, you may deny, you may pace your chambers in fear, but the puzzle is nearly solved." The room was silent, every eye fixed upon Poirot. His voice fell to a whisper, yet carried to every corner. The forgotten diary has remembered, and it will speak. Chapter 4. The diary reveals its truth. The day dawned stormy. Heavy clouds pressed low upon the countryside, the kind of oppressive sky that seemed to foreshadow revelation. Within Whitcombe Manor, every corridor echoed with unease. Servants moved quietly, avoiding the library where Poirot had gathered his clues in orderly display. The photograph of Margaret Lane, the scorched letters, the scrap of paper about the fire, each lay upon the oak table like relics awaiting judgment. Hastings, restless, walked the length of the room again and again. "Poirot," he said at last, "I can't stand this waiting. You said last night the puzzle is nearly solved. What is it you see that I cannot?" Poirot, seated perfectly upright in his chair, hands steepled, gave a faint smile. "Patience, Hastings. It is like Murder on the Orient Express. The truth is already before us, but it requires the little gray cells to arrange it. The time for revelation is near, but not yet. We must allow the family to reveal themselves a little more." Hastings scowled. "You always say that, and yet here I am in suspense while you sit there as calm as a cat." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Suspense is most instructive, mon ami. It is when people are unsettled that they betray themselves." That afternoon, Poirot asked Evelyn to summon her cousins once more. The Whitcombes gathered in the drawing room. Charles stiff and indignant, Clara pale and trembling, Michael restless and irritable. Evelyn herself stood apart, her eyes searching Poirot's face for answers. Poirot rose slowly, his presence commanding the room. "Mesdames et messieurs, I thank you for your patience. You are almost curious, I think, to know what I have discovered. But before I speak, I wish to ask each of you a question, and I ask that you answer with truth." He turned first to Charles. "Monsieur, what do you recall of the night the east wing burned?" Charles's jaw tightened. "I was a boy of 10. I remember smoke, confusion, servants running to and fro. We were told it was an accident caused by a fallen lamp." Poirot's gaze was steady, and yet the diary, the letters, the scrap of paper, each suggests otherwise. "Did you ever question this tale?" "I did not," Charles said sharply. "My uncle told us to forget it, and so I did." Poirot inclined his head slightly, then turned to Clara. "Madam, and you?" Clara's hands twisted together in her lap. I was newly married into the family at the time. They said little to me, but I remember Margaret Lane. She was kind to me. Then one day she was gone, and no one would explain. Her voice broke, and she looked down. Finally, Poirot addressed Michael. "And you, monsieur? You were but a child." Michael's fingers drummed rapidly upon the arm of his chair. His eyes darted nervously. "I hardly remember. Just smoke and shouting. I've no more to say." Poirot studied him a moment longer, then returned to his place by the table. "So, 3 memories, 3 silences. But silence, Miss Amos, is itself a voice." That evening, Poirot walked once more through the east wing. Hastings followed reluctantly, muttering about drafts and ghosts. Poirot's candle flickered against the ruined walls. He paused before the chamber of the trunk, his eyes fixed upon the initials Margaret Lane had scratched into the floorboards. "She was here," Poirot whispered. She left her mark. And she left more. Hastings. I am certain of it. He examined the trunk again, this time feeling along its base. His fingers paused at a loose panel. With a gentle press, the panel gave way, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside lay a bundle of papers wrapped in oilcloth, remarkably preserved despite the years. Poirot lifted them out carefully, his eyes shining with triumph. Behold, Hastings, Margaret Lane's own writings. They returned to the library, where Poirot spread the pages upon the table. Margaret's handwriting was clear, urgent, filled with fear and determination. The fire was set deliberately. I have found proof. Sir Reginald ordered it himself, to conceal what lay within the East Wing. There is something hidden here, something that if revealed would destroy the Whitcombe name. I cannot remain silent. I fear for my life. Hastings let out a low whistle. Good Lord, Poirot. She knew, and she tried to leave a record of it. Poirot nodded gravely. Yes, Hastings. And for that, she was silenced. Not by disappearance of chance, but by deliberate act. The diary, the trunk, these papers, they are her testament. Evelyn, pale with shock, whispered, My uncle, he burned his own house. Poirot's eyes met hers. So it seems. But the question remains, what was he hiding? What was worth the destruction of a wing and the silencing of a woman? The answer came sooner than expected. That night, a cry rang through the halls. Hastings and Poirot rushed toward the sound and found Clara Whitcombe collapsed in the corridor, sobbing uncontrollably. He confessed, she cried. Michael, he told me everything. He said he knows the truth about Margaret Lane, that she died here in this house. He said he's lived with the secret all his life. Poirot's eyes sharpened. Where is he now? But Michael was gone. His room stood empty, the window flung open to the storm. Poirot gazed out into the rain-swept night, his expression unreadable. So, the net tightens. The guilty often flee when the truth nears. But he cannot flee far, not from Hercule Poirot. The next morning, Michael returned of his own accord, pale and haggard. He faced the family gathered in the library, his hands shaking. I can't bear it any longer, he said hoarsely. Yes, Margaret Lane died here. I saw it. I was a child, but I remember. There was shouting in the East Wing, flames, smoke, and then silence. They told me never to speak of it. They said she had left, that it was better forgotten. But I saw. His voice broke. I saw my uncle carry her lifeless body through the smoke. Evelyn gasped, covering her mouth. Clara wept openly. Charles turned pale, but said nothing. Poirot rose slowly, his eyes upon Michael. So, at last, the truth emerges. Margaret Lane did not vanish. She died here. And Sir Reginald concealed it beneath fire and silence. Michael buried his face in his hands. It was murder, wasn't it? All these years I've known, but I couldn't speak. Poirot's voice was grave. Yes, monsieur, it was murder. And more than that, it was the murder of truth itself. But truth, as you see, has a way of returning. That night, as the storm raged on, Poirot sat alone in the library. The diary opened before him. Margaret's writings spread around it. He felt the weight of her voice, silenced yet enduring. He whispered softly, as though to her spirit, Mademoiselle, you are not forgotten. Your diary has spoken. Your puzzle is nearly complete. His eyes gleamed. Tomorrow, all shall be revealed. The family shall hear every word, and justice, though long delayed, shall be done. The storm thundered above Whitcombe Manor, as though the heavens themselves awaited the final revelation. Chapter 5. The Puzzle Completed. The storm broke with sudden violence the following morning. Sheets of rain lashed against the tall windows of Whitcombe Manor, rattling the panes as if urging the truth to be spoken at last. Within the great library, Poirot had arranged everything with meticulous care. The recovered diary, the bundle of Margaret Lane's hidden writings, the letters scorched by fire, and the photograph of her smiling face. They were laid out upon the oak table like exhibits in a courtroom. Hastings stood nearby, his arms folded, his jaw set with tension. He had seen this scene before in other cases, in the murder of Roger Ackroyd and in Peril at End House. Poirot gathering his suspects, presenting the truth with theatrical precision. Yet each time, it felt as though the air itself thickened, heavy with the weight of revelation. One by one, the family gathered. Evelyn entered first, her face pale but determined. Clara followed, her eyes rimmed red with sleepless grief. Charles strode in stiffly, his chin lifted, though his hands betrayed a tremor. And last came Michael, gaunt from the night's turmoil, his gaze fixed on the floor. Poirot stood at the head of the table, his small frame upright, his eyes shining with the light of certainty. Madame et Messrs, he began softly, the time has come. For many years, the truth of what happened in this house was buried beneath ashes, lies, and silence. But silence cannot last forever. The diary of Margaret Lane has spoken, and now I shall speak for her. He lifted the diary gently, almost reverently. This book, found hidden in a locked trunk, contained more than memories. It contained warnings. Margaret Lane discovered that Sir Reginald Whitcombe set the fire in the East Wing deliberately. Why? Because within those walls lay secrets, evidence that could have ruined him. Or those secrets? The answer lies here in Margaret's writings. He spread the papers before them. She wrote that she had found proof. Proof that Sir Reginald was guilty of fraud, of theft, of deception against his own kin. He had forged documents, concealed debts, and diverted family funds into his own pocket. She threatened to reveal him. And for that, she was silenced. Gasps filled the room. Evelyn pressed a hand to her mouth. Clara's sobs broke the stillness. Poirot's voice sharpened. Margaret Lane did not vanish. She was murdered. Her body never left this house. Sir Reginald carried her through the smoke of the fire he had set and concealed her where none would find her. And to ensure her memory faded, he told you all she had left. He erased her as one erases a word from a page. But, like ink that lingers beneath the surface, her truth remained. Charles sprang to his feet, his face flushed. You can't know that. It was years ago. You accuse a man long dead. What proof have you? Poirot's gaze turned upon him, calm yet unyielding. The proof is here, monsieur. In her handwriting, in the initials scratched into the floor, in the memory of a child who saw his uncle carrying a lifeless form through the fire. Michael, you saw this with your own eyes, did you not? Michael lifted his head slowly, his face gray. I did. I was told I had dreamed it, that I must never speak of it again. But I remember. I remember her dress trailing in the ash. I remember his face. He shuddered. I have lived with it all my life. Poirot inclined his head. Yes, the burden of silence is heavy. But today it is lifted. Charles faltered, his outrage collapsing into despair. Then the Whitcombe name, it is destroyed. No, Poirot said firmly. The truth does not destroy. It cleanses. It allows one to build anew. To live in shadow is destruction. To live in truth is salvation. Poirot paced slowly, his eyes upon each face in turn. And there's one more thing. Margaret Lane was not alone. She confided in one she trusted, her dearest friend. She sent a letter, hidden among her papers, naming Evelyn's mother as her confidant. That is why Evelyn found the trunk, why fate guided her steps to the East Wing. The past cries out through the generations. Evelyn's voice trembled. So my mother, she knew? She suspected. Poirot's gaze softened. She knew enough to fear. She told you once that the East Wing was forbidden, did she not? That was her way of protecting you, keeping you away from the ashes of betrayal. But she could not silence the truth forever. You, mademoiselle, brought it forth. There was silence in the library, broken only by the storm's fading thunder. The family sat stunned, each wrapped in the enormity of the revelation. Poirot stood still as a statue, the diary resting in his hand. At last, Hastings spoke, his voice low with awe. So that's it then? After all these years, the forgotten diary has spoken, and the truth is clear. Yes, Hastings, Poirot replied softly. The puzzle is complete. The little gray cells have arranged the pieces. Margaret Lane is vindicated. The lies are ended. He set the diary upon the table and placed his hand gently upon it. Let her rest at last in peace. Outside, the storm passed, leaving a washed silver sky. Sunlight broke through, spilling across the grounds of Whitcombe Manor. For the first time in decades, the house seemed lighter, as though the weight of secrecy had lifted. Poirot and Hastings stepped outside into the fresh air. Hastings drew a deep breath. Well, Poirot, another case solved. But I must say, this one was different. It wasn't just about catching a murderer. It was about giving voice to someone who'd been silenced. Poirot smiled faintly. Yes, mon ami, not all victories are of the courtroom. Some are of the soul. Margaret Lane speaks still, through her words, through her courage, and through us. He turned back to the house, his eyes thoughtful. Remember, Hastings, the truth may be forgotten, but it is never lost. It waits, always, for the one who will listen. And so ends the puzzle of the forgotten diary. A tale of secrets, of silence, and of truth reclaimed. Hercule Poirot has once again proven that even the darkest mysteries can be solved if one dares to listen. If you were drawn into this mystery, then join us again for the next case. Subscribe, leave a comment, and share this story so others may walk with Poirot through the shadows into the light. Until then, keep your eyes open and never forget, the truth is always waiting.